Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Get ready to be inspired, hear success stories, and learn tips and principles for bringing out the best in everyone.
Hello, everyone. This is Debra, and this is Human Potential at Work. My guest today is Dr. Chris Law, and Chris and I have known each other so many years. I've known Chris probably as long as most of the people that I know in the industry, and we're doing the show right in the middle of pure hysteria about the coronavirus or the CO-19. I need to remember the real name of it these days, but and there have actually been consequences to Dr. Law because he runs the Accessibility Legal Summit and he had to postpone it. So we're going to talk more about that. But we just wanted to acknowledge and talk a little bit about what's happening. And I think it's there. Obviously, there's a lot of hysteria. There's a lot of oversharing of information, and some of our leaders are just making things worse and scaring people more and more and more. So I think it's a good time for us all to take a deep breath and be calm and do what we can do to not make the situation worse and sort of be the light bringers at the same time, servant leaders. And Dr. Law is one of those servant leaders, and I'm going to revert now to calling him Chris because we are very good friends. And I'm going to read his bio to you because I've known him for a long time, and he's got a very impressive career, and I think he has a very unique career and something that adds a lot of value to our community. And that's one reason why I really admire the work he does. But he's the president of Accessibility Track Consulting, and he's had that firm since 2015. Accessibility Track has delivered innovative projects with and for the accessibility community. He's very committed to making sure that we all have access to technology, to digital inclusion, very important in his work. 2016, he co-founded the annual Information Communications Technology Accessibility Testing Symposium. In 2019, he founded the annual Digital Accessibility Legal Summit. He's the lead developer and lead author of the National Federation of the Blind's Accessibility Switchboard information portal, and we're going to talk about some of these efforts. The Switchboard brings together community of practice of over 30 organizations to produce resources and guidance to help newcomers in the field of digital accessibility. Since 2019, Chris has been gathering interest and support for the generation of a new organization to tackle the need for industry consensus standards for accessibility reporting. And the new organization is now being formed and will begin operational in 2020. And the reality is, more and more we're seeing litigation and lawsuits over the lack of access. And Chris saw this and he was like, well, maybe we could do a better job of really understanding the expectations of what we're asking everybody to do beyond the standards. Of course, we need standards. Nobody's saying that we don't. But what do we do to help corporations and other organizations be more successful with accessibility? How can we bring more of these stakeholders together to really have impact? And that's one reason why I'm really impressed with this work. He also worked with the United States government for many years, working on, the testing protocols and how do we do this? How do we really determine when somebody's there? And then, for goodness sake, how do we keep them accessible? So he's just done a lot of really good things. He also has a PhD from MRIT University in Melbourne, Australia. And he now lives in the United States, in which we're really glad to have him as an American here. And I think he's doing some really powerful work. So, Chris, sorry for giving you such a long introduction, but you have
No, it's a
sort of a
great
different background.
That's a great introduction. Yeah. Thanks very much. Yeah. It's a real pleasure to be here and to be on the show. Thank you.
Yeah, and Chris, one thing that you and I have in common and that we really care about is we have experience in organizational development.
Mhm.
Because, and that I remember that was the first, when I first started talking to you, you're like, well, if you're not looking at this from the lens of organizational development, how should this work throughout the entire organization? We're just never
Yeah.
going to be successful. And you really were the first person I heard really talking about that. And then I joined you in those conversations, but you really
Yeah.
were one of my first mentors on that.
That's exactly what I went to RMIT to do my PhD thesis on, was organizational behavior in response to accessibility issues. That came about really because, for the longest time, we've been trying as a field to try to figure out, what is it that really causes substantial change in this area? And, I started off working on interface design, ergonomics, user interface design, usability testing of devices, mainstream devices for use by people with disabilities. We did a lot of promotion of that, but we never got any industry uptick, uptake.
Right.
Sorry.
Right.
And then I went on to, and then we started talking to the actual designers, the developers, the programmers who were not making accessible code on websites, and started talking to them and found out that they were having real trouble with the guidance on how to make accessible websites. So we studied guidance for a long time. But then what emerged after that study, and which led to the PhD work on organizational behavior, was really that even when you had great guidance, if you don't have the impetus from your management to say, you must work on this and this must be an actual priority, if you don't have that, what you get is situations where people say, okay, well, we need to make our website accessible. People sitting in a room and they nod their heads. And then 6 months later, they say, how's it going with this accessibility? And they say, we looked at that, it was very difficult and we couldn't do that. And then maybe in the next version, next right. iteration. There's less of that now in the web space. But the fact, there's been improvement, but there's been improvement from such a low bar that overall things are still bad. And that's why there are lawsuits, because those things have not generally happened over the course of time.
Right. And of course, we have lawsuits in the United States, but, not everybody has the same litigation system that we have in the US. Mm-hmm. And so we also see all over the world that, we're not having real access. And I know that you were talking to sort of your board of, a group of advisors you have, steering committee, yeah. Thank you. And someone had mentioned, I think it was Jack McLaney, who had made a comment that with more Americans, well, I shouldn't say just Americans, with more people being forced to work from home. Now, my companies, people have worked from home for years, so this is just what we do. But with more and more people working from home, he expects to see more lawsuits because we know things aren't accessible. And so unfortunately, people are not going to have the access they need to really do their job. And what we're going to find is that, once again, accessibility is not just for people that are blind or people that have mobility impairments, or accessibility is for everyone. And so we're going to see a lot of people not having access to what they need to be truly productive. It's going to hurt their employers. And so it's really a shame that the conference that you were putting on in April is having to be postponed. But at the same time, we each have to be smart. The World Health Organization has now called the coronavirus a pandemic officially. Yep. And there are things that we can do as individuals to protect ourselves and our families and our loved ones and our employees as employers and blah, blah, blah. So we each have a role to play, and being hysterical and, that's not going to help us, but and let me let you address that. And then let's talk a little bit more about the conference.
Sure. Well, a number of events are basically canceled. One of the events that I was actually sponsoring or planning to sponsor was the National Federation of the Blind's legal symposium that they hold at the end of March, and their event is on a wide range of legal issues. Our event focuses on digital accessibility. But they decided to cancel. Other events have decided to postpone, but we're in a time where just last night, the National Basketball Association just decided, right, we're on indefinite hold. So for us, we decided, look, let's go on indefinite hold. Let's wait and see what happens over the coming month or so. Do things get better? Do they stabilize, or do they get substantially worse? Let's wait and see what happens. Our goal is to have a face-to-face event again, either later in the summer or maybe early in the fall. If things are getting substantially worse, maybe we'll look at doing an online event, but something somehow will happen before the end of this year. The topic is too important. There's the need for discussion and dialogue is too important. So we'll have it somehow, and we'll just wait and see what actually transpires.
I agree. My husband, I am personally trying to stay away from the news because the news does not help my anxiety and depression, and it causes me to get too fearful, and then I can't do my work. I can't be as good of a wife, a mother, a friend, so, but my husband loves watching it, and he watches all of these comedy shows too. And they announced on Stephen Colbert's show that they're not going to have studio audiences anymore,
Right.
and I hope this doesn't happen selfishly, but last night I went to my gym and I was doing Zumba, and we have 50, 60, 70 people in class. And is that safe? So I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of people
Well,
trying to understand what's happening, and what do we need to do, and how do we need to be responsible. But at
yeah.
the same time, as we force more people to go digital, which we're a digital world, accessibility is becoming more and more and more of an issue. And so this information is needed. But let's just talk
Yeah.
about that a little bit. Talk about because this is not the first conference. So let's talk a
Mhm.
little bit about why you have these conferences. What are these conferences? Why do people need to attend? Or do only people that live in the United States need to attend?
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
things like that.
Sure. Let me do a share here, and I'll share this share a website here. And so this you should see an article. This is an article from SafePath. Sure, SafePath is a legal company, defense side, and they've participated in our events before, and in the upcoming, they're scheduled to talk as well. So. This is a chart showing what's happened over the last few years from 2017. Let me zoom it up a little bit. 2017 to 2018 to 2019. And in 2017, there were 814 website accessibility lawsuits. In 2018, there was a 177% increase.
Wow.
The increase projected for 2018 was 7% in this article. So it seems like it's sort of plateauing, but like you say, now that everybody's going to be working from home, expect a whole bunch of lawsuits in this area about inaccessibility of telework. In fact, last year, Dan Goldstein was talking about one of the biggest untapped area here in digital accessibility is in those internal systems that companies have not being accessible. Most of these lawsuits are about education sites that are not accessible, or goods and services sites that are not accessible. So, why this came about is because these lawsuits, the jump started happening 2017 to 2018, major jump, and they started happening because they could, right? Because case law just started building up, where people were saying, look, it's obvious that you can make your website accessible, so go ahead and make your website accessible, right? And that was the sort of gist of what was happening in each of the lawsuits, right? And because people could, then they started to do more of it. So we see two distinct camps of activity that are happening in the legal space. One is what you might call the very clearly legitimate cases where an individual or a group of individuals get together and says, look, we really want access to this particular service and we are not getting it. And the company has not given us any kind of support. Our only option is to sue. And then there are what you might consider maybe the questionable. There's a large amount of activity on what some people call drive-by lawsuits, where people are just sending out hundreds of lawsuits en masse, and so our focus was on that sort of first group, really. We know that the other group happens, and it's happened since day one of the ADA, right?
Right.
When the ADA first came out, people were sending out lawsuits just because there weren't ramps into buildings, there weren't accessible parking spots, those type of things. So that activity happens, and it's off on the side. Our focus is really on the people who have genuine, clear issues that need solving, and that there's a process going on with those, not just a sort of mass mailing. But back in 2018, when we conceived of having an event, we sort of just noticed, myself and Jack McElhaney and others, a dialogue with yourself as well, and Lainey Feingold, we started talking about this, and the fact was that there was no debate happening. There was no discussions, no getting people from both sides into the same room. There were just news articles. And aside from news articles, you also had webinars of people promoting their services for accessibility testing and remediation and those types of things. So people were selling in this area. People were writing news articles about it. People were filing lawsuits. Nobody was getting together to discuss things. So that's the need, and that's why we held the first event last year.
And I think there's a lot of misinformation about the lawsuits. You know, I've heard corporations say, you know, off
the record,
off the record quietly. It's just people with disabilities trying to get rich, you know, and they're just, you know, they're nuisance lawsuits. And we still have the physical lawsuits, people, you know, filing, you know, claims, lawsuits because they can't get access to restaurants and to hospitals and their offices.
Yeah.
So the physical, the bill barriers,
still go on,
it's still going on. But, you know, why do you think that it's important that we have litigation with these kind of cases? Or do you think, I assume that you do think it's important, obviously.
well, look, you know, if you go back to the very fundamentals of law, right? Laws only exist when people in the population are not doing the things that you want them to do, right? So the Americans with Disabilities Act came about because goods and services were unavailable to go get in person because of physical barriers in the environment. So the society said, okay, well, we need a law because people, just asking them nicely has not caused significant change. And so laws happen for that reason. Enforcement and follow-up and litigation happens when people don't follow the laws that are out there. Yeah, so you can liken it to any other law. There's a law that you're supposed to stop at a red traffic light, right?
That's right.
Okay, so, and then that law gets enforced, yeah, and there are consequences to running those lights. So it's the same as any other law that websites have been, through the courts, have been decided that they are subject to the Americans with Disabilities Act. The technology is clearly there. Anybody can just Google, how do I make a website accessible? And you're going to find a lot of answers, right? Okay. Right. And so the fact that people are not making their websites accessible enables people to actually do those lawsuits of both kinds, either the drive-by in quotes, or the bring it forth in a series of progressions, either in the courts or outside of the courts. There's plenty of information now about Lainey Feingold's topic of structured negotiation, you know, which is how do you get both sides together in a legal case to work through it and try to keep it out of the courtroom, keep it nice, keep it friendly, and just work through the problem. A lot of these companies, they're not trying to be inaccessible. They just don't know how, you know.
And they're so
Yeah.
confused. They're so,
Yeah.
which is your point too. And I was talking to a very large brand and they were saying, well, all right, so we have to make sure our code is accessible, our
Mhm.
HTML code. And I said,
Yeah.
well, anything that's on your website has to be accessible. And they're like, well, what do you mean anything? And I said, I mean anything. So,
Mhm.
well, we have a lot of PDFs on our website. What about, we have videos and of course I was also helping them understand that PDFs, videos, everything on the website. And they're like, yeah, but the apps and stuff, there are partners. They're not us. And I said, are they on your website? Yeah, they're on your website. Yeah, but there are partners.
Yeah.
They're on your website. And
Sure.
so I think sometimes people get confused about what we're even talking about with a website. Chris, are we just
Yeah.
talking about HTML?
Yeah.
And also one more thing to throw at you as you answer.
Yeah.
Well, this is easy. We'll just throw an overlay on top of it, because there's some really cool overlays.
Sure.
And so we're just going to throw overlays on it and then we're done. And we'll get an equality index and somebody will say, oh, you're at 100%. Yay, you're all done. And then you get sued. And they're like, so lots of confusion. So
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot going on there.
yeah.
Yeah, they it brings up the supply chain. There's been lots of talk and presentations about the supply chain and saying to your vendor. So if you're saying, well, this is a partner, this is a vendor who supplies our PDFs. Like, well, what did you have in your contract about accessibility?
Right.
Okay, so then the burden comes back to you to put it into your contract. In terms of then companies trying to figure out what are the solutions, you've got the quick Band-Aid solution of put an overlay, but that only can go so far. It's an automated system to a problem that is beyond the current limits of automation. So in the accessibility testing world, we have manual methods and automated methods, and the automated methods of testing are really only good for like a quality control check once you have a website in place to make sure that say if you're a news site, are you putting headings marked up properly? Are you putting images with alt text? Or did you happen to get a new employee who's never been trained in these things and it slips through? So yeah, you do have to go back to the code, but you also have to go back, like we were saying, to the organizational level,
right,
to ensure that code is one of those things that gets checked on a regular basis, that it gets audited, that it gets attention in meetings, priority on the agenda. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, I'm not saying that the overlay tools that don't have a place in the market. They definitely do, but it is unwise to think any of these tools are going to solve all your problems. It's just unwise. And I remember I was at the Enabling conference and somebody came up to me and they said, well, this amazing tool, it'll make you 100% compliant and accessible. And so I was a little skeptical and I said, well, okay, so how is it making the PDFs accessible? Just out of curiosity. And they're like, well, no, not the PDFs. I said, okay, well, videos, how are they making sure that they're captioned and transcribed? Oh, no. I said, so you're in the United States now, and the sign right behind you says that your tool makes it 100% 508 compliant and accessible. And I'm afraid that wording behind you are going to get your customers in trouble.
Yeah.
And then they didn't want to talk to me anymore. So,
you mentioned from my bio. You mentioned from my bio at the beginning that one of the projects that I've been working on the last year is to create a new set of reporting standards. So I'm trying to bring together people in industry. I've got about 150 people on my mailing list of people who are closely interested in getting this done. We're going to start a new member organization to vote at the end of development years on new ways of reporting, so that if you saw that particular tool, that sort of method, and you could say, okay, here's the standardized one-page format of the test reporting, and you'd be able to see your tool is got a sort of a grayed out thing where it says making captions and audio descriptions accessible,
Right.
because your tool can't do that. So tell us, what is the extra thing that you have to buy to go along with your tool to make those things accessible?
Right.
So
Just so
that's one of the goals of that project.
Yeah, just so that we all know, because I think a lot of people aren't doing this to be, deceptive. I think sometimes they don't
know.
understand. Is it terrible to say that sometimes in our accessibility field, the accessibility experts don't completely understand the complexity of this? I'm seeing my customers, people we're working with this very large technology company, and they are overwhelmed by the misinformation they're getting about this. They're just overwhelmed and frightened. And of course,
this is why industry standardize, right? This is why you would you have a electrician who wasn't certified, right?
Right.
I know how to wire a plug, so yeah, right.
What could go wrong?
Would you have a dentist that wasn't certified?
Right.
And
a surgeon.
In accessibility, so the IAAP, the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, is doing certifications in this area. That's a new program it's 2 or 3 years old now. But that's the only place that's really doing that. But there's still there's not enough on the demand side yet, where people are thinking, okay, do I need to ask for IAAP certification in order to have someone work for me, on this project?
Could that be part of my organizational development plan?
Yeah.
Absolutely. There, you need to include the IAAPs, and the industry's still young. We're still growing. And so let's talk a little bit more about the summit. You've actually done the summit before. So do you mind telling us, you mentioned a couple of speakers you've had in the past.
Yeah.
Talk about the first summit you had and who some of the speakers were. I will tell you before you say it that I was not able to attend. I heard glowing reports. I heard this was the most powerful conference people have been to in a long time. It was very valuable. You brought some interesting stakeholders together. And it was, I applaud you and the speakers. I heard it was amazing. And also you have a book now. So
So on those two points, let me just do a share of the book. I'll bring up the Word file that used to generate the book. We did get a lot of great feedback from the event. I had some people come up to me and say personally, this is the best run event that I've been to. So that was great to hear. And one of the things that we had said from that event while we were at the event was that we said, look, we don't want all this information to just go for this one day and be gone.
Right.
We really want to put it into a publication. And so at the time, my thought was, well, that'll take about 3 months to do. And but then those other projects got in the way, especially the accessibility reporting project. And I ended up having to focus my time on that. So here we are, 1 year, it's actually 1 year since the first symposium, first legal summit today. So March 12th, 2019. This is what we have. And I'm going to go. I'm going to scroll down to the table of contents here and talk about some of the speakers that we had. So we had Howard Rosenblum, who is the CEO of the National Association of the Deaf, who also trained as a lawyer. And so we wanted to have an opening keynote address of somebody who's not just practicing in this area, but also has a personal experience. I mean, if you think about, what has come up in a couple of times in some of these publications around, or news articles, I should say, is that law firms that are representing people in digital accessibility cases on both sides, someone eventually asked the question to them, well, what about your law firm's website? Is that accessible? And it's like, let me check. Right?
Yeah.
And there's trust me from doing my research. when I created this event. Not all law firm websites are accessible.
I would say
So
most of them are not. And
mhm,
we've taught some lawyers how to make their websites accessible.
yeah.
I would say
Yeah, so
most of them are
we wanted someone to talk not just about their experiences practicing law, but practicing law in an inaccessible legal environment,
Mhm.
right? It's only recently that the big publishing houses that deal with legal research are starting to even think about making their resources accessible. So Howard gave some wonderful insights about his experiences. Dan Goldstein is a retired lawyer he was with Brown, Goldstein and Levy. He was involved in the Target lawsuit, which was really the first big one that happened and set a precedent. This was going back some 10 years or so ago now. And we titled his talk, Fixing the Slow Progress. One of the points that he makes in there is that, in all of his time as a lawyer, he worked on maybe 20 lawsuits, right? And so that's 20 websites that are fixed. Well, how many websites are out there? How many lawyers are there? How many cases are there? So if we go back to the number of cases, even if we had, 2,500 or so cases in 2017, about the same amount in 2018, the number of sites that are getting fixed is just still a drop in the ocean. So we really need to think of new ways of doing things. So he is, since he's been retired, he's been working on organizational standards. He talks about that in his talk, and in this book, I'll go down to the guidance and standards section. We have a section on organizational standards for inclusion. That's from Dan. Then we had a defendant and a plaintiff point of view in the next talks, and they ended up being actually the two on the same stage. It was Christina Lawney from Safe Path Shore and Timothy Elder from TRE Legal Practice. And so when I was putting this together, this event, a lot of people told me, you're not going to get lawyers on both sides to be in the same room together. You're just not. And I said, well, let's just go ask them. Let's go ask nicely and see if they will. And you know what? They said, yeah, sure. And actually, what came out of this was that Christina Lawney and Timothy Elder, who work on the opposite side of the fence, they got together and they generated a set of guidelines on their own before the event, and nobody knew it was coming. And it turned out to be one of the hits of the event. Yeah. And so not only did we have them on the same stage, we ended up passing out the guidance and the standards in this volume, Parsing, P-A-R-S-I-N-G, passing out the guidance and standards. So we have sections now where we have these best practices along with the commentary. Let's just go there for a second. So we have here's the section on best practices for plaintiffs' attorneys. Number one, send a letter before filing a lawsuit. Right. Most companies do not want a lawsuit on the public record. And then the commentary that they gave during the event, and then the resources in the rest of the publication here or elsewhere that relate to that particular area. So all of these guidelines, there's 30 or so guidelines that they developed here.
And we'll be sure to put a link to the book so that you can purchase the book. We also will put a link to some of the other the articles and stuff that Chris has shared so that we can make sure everybody has access to it.
Yeah.
So.
We also had Lainey Feingold talking about.
She's wonderful. We've had her on the air before.
Yeah, talking about ethics, really. She was really sort of focusing on this. There's this difference between those two camps that we talked about.
Right.
why
Lainey's
they exist
amazing.
and how to spot them and that sort of thing.
Yeah, she's amazing.
And finally, in terms of talks, in part A of our book, we have the talks, transcripts of the talks. I asked Jared Smith to interview each of the other speakers to find out what their views and what their predictions were for the future.
Cool.
So what is going to happen next?
And that's, you have that in the book too. So and Jared's a wonderful speaker. He's a real brilliant person in our space.
Yeah. The final thing to mention from the event, we had two talks by Jack McElhaney and Karen Peltz-Strauss, respectively.
Both favorites, yeah. They're both amazing people.
Great. We decided, just because of the nature of their talks and the resources that they put together, they both put together a phenomenal amount of effort to provide tons and tons of resources. So what we did was we reorganized the information from their talks and put it into a format that we hope is useful for people who are new to this area. Yeah, and so Jax provided resources for responding to ADA digital accessibility lawsuits, and Karen provided how to respond to FCC communication video programming lawsuits. Less lawsuits happen in that area, but again, it's one of those areas that people are going to, once they've had enough with the standard website side, they're going to start getting into telephony issues and communication issues and video programming issues.
And we're already seeing some of it. We're already seeing apps, and we're seeing, proxies. And so this isn't going away anytime soon, which is important.
That's right. Yeah.
So, all right, well, let's talk about, we'll make sure that we provide a link to the book. I would highly recommend it. It's a wonderful resource. And I compliment you and the speakers that you were able to create this resource so that it's not just a one-time event. All that wonderful data just gone.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this year.
Sure. So this year,
to you, the virus crashed into your summit.
Yeah. So let's talk about this year. Why don't I bring up the program for this year here. So this is our program and our speakers. I'll just sort of talk through it. So we have a similar format this year, but we've expanded into an extra half day. So on the main summit day, which was scheduled for April 23rd, and now will be postponed. So we've got a date to be arranged here. Deepa Goria is a blind lawyer in Disability Rights Maryland, and we're going to have a similar type of session, but with additional perspectives from Deepa as our opening keynote. The event is being held at American University Washington College of Law, which is in Washington, D.C. And Professor Robert Dinstein is a professor there, and he works in the area of cognitive disabilities. Again, it's another area that hasn't gotten as much attention in the legal space, but you really kind of want to get ready because this will become more of an issue. Mm-hmm. It's getting much more airplay, this issue, as you know.
Yes.
And then Marcy Lipset is an education advocate from Michigan, and Marcy is one of the folks who has filed lots of legal cases, not necessarily lawsuits, but she describes herself as a sort of frequent flyer with the Department of Education. And what she is really doing is trying to figure out how do you get all these educational institutions to make their things accessible, because they haven't been. And so we wanted to get the perspective of somebody who's actually filing a lot of lawsuits and bring them into the room and to hear what they've got to say. In the afternoon session, there's a lot happening in Canada right now. Now, right. we know that the legal activities in the US are what is taking up the sort of news cycle around this topic. But in Canada, there's been some recent developments um, in the federal space, and we're lucky enough to have Pina Dentino and Jennifer Chadwick, who are both based in Toronto, and they will be talking in a shorter session just about what is happening in Canada. And then we're going to have Karen Pelt-Strauss, who is intimately familiar with the US system, to give her commentary on what the differences are. And we want people to know what are the things that they need to be aware of that's happening in Canada, and are there opportunities for firms in the US to help in the Canadian system and their response to this area.
And not to mention that, most corporations and organizations are global. So we need to be looking at this from more than just the lens of the US. So I think that's one reason why it's very powerful that we have, the really talented Canadian speakers, and we're looking at this from all the different perspectives.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. One of the things that we got to when we got Timothy Elder and Christina Loney together, and we started talking about what are the things that make for successful interactions. One of the things that clearly came out from their guidelines is that it's very easy to get off on the wrong foot when the legal teams from both sides get talking, especially if you've got people that are not that familiar with digital accessibility issues. So we invited a defendant lawyer, which is Min Vu, a plaintiff lawyer, Eve Hill, and an accessibility consultant, Carl Groves, to join together on the stage to talk about how do you actually make a good start, because that sets the tone for everything else that happens in the case.
I know. I would love to have heard that one. That's a great
we got a good overall picture last year, and now we want to sort of zero in on a particular area, try to cover that in detail. And again, the information that is in here, hopefully it won't take another year for us to publish on this event, but our goal will be to take the information that is presented and put it into another volume, so that information is out there on a wider basis. But people coming to the event will get that information before anybody else. So, and then the final sessions are the implications of future technology on digital accessibility. This is John Avila from Level Access, as well as Jennifer Chadwick from Site Improve. Changes in the way people work, the gig economy, digital, virtual reality, augmented reality. What happens when those start to become job requirements?
Right. And
people don't have an accessible system. So we wanted to actually this time focus not on the legal trends. We covered that last year. We want to actually focus on the actual technologies that are going on. And then, oh, look at that. The last talk of the day is Debra Rue and Lamondre Pugh from Rue Global Impact. Why don't you talk about what you're talking about?
Well, when you and I first started talking about it, I said, we really got to look at what's happening globally, because there's a lot of stuff happening globally. We've got to apply this and all the disruptions, and talking about disruptions, pandemic disruptions, telework disruptions. So yeah, we were going to talk about it from a global perspective, and how do we, we all learn together. And yeah, so we're looking forward to whenever we're going to do this, but, so who, I know you've talked a lot about who the summit was for, and I think that was very powerful. You had sponsors involved, and of course you want more sponsors involved and exhibitors. Sure. And, what happens during the rest of the year? It's funny. I was going to ask you, what happens on legal for the rest of the year in between the events, but with the pandemic.
That's right. Yeah, sure. Again, we will hold an event at some point. Let's go back to face-to-face here. Stop the share. Okay. Yeah, we will hold an event of some kind, but yeah, in terms of sponsors, right now we have two prime sponsors, which is Thomson Reuters and Essential Accessibility, And we have space for one more prime sponsor to sponsor the breaks. And then people can also do inserts into the packets for attendees. That's another sponsorship level as well.
Right.
What else is happening in the in between? So apart from the book and producing that, one of the things that we've been working on is, I've been in close touch with Tim Elder and Christina Lawney, and because the guidelines were such a big hit at the first event, I've been working with them to try to expand on those and engage more people. So more contributions and update things. So we've chatted about that. Unfortunately, one of the workshops that we were going to do was a mini workshop at the NFB Law Symposium that was cancelled for the end of this month. Right. But what we will do at the event is we'll have an optional half-day workshop the day after the summit. So if people want to stay on, we can do a workshop where we talk about with Christina and Tim, and we talk about what it is that people can do with these guidelines and what ideas people have for expanding them and redeveloping them. So that'll be a half-day workshop. Prior to the prior day for the summit, we're actually, myself and Pina Dentino and Eve Hill are going to be doing a full-day course on risk assessment and risk mitigation in organizations. We know that that's a big driver for organizations, but most people are just kind of muddling through,
yes,
put it that way. Yeah, they know that there's risk there. They're not sure how to measure it. They're not sure how to mitigate it. And so this is a course about how to be systematic about that. Also, we know that the lawsuits are going to carry on through the year because they can, right? And because things are still not accessible. Right. We know that accessibility consultants are still going to be offering their services. What we don't have right now is any kind of community around this topic.
Right.
So there isn't an ongoing dialogue between people from both sides. There isn't a forum. There's no association. There's nothing like that. So the dialogue that happens during the year is really unidirectional. News articles, webinars from companies selling their services, those types of things. And maybe that's something that we can actually talk about when we get together for the summit, is to say, well, what could we do to spur some kind of community dialogue throughout the year? Because these issues come up on a regular basis.
Well, I know corporations would love to have access to this kind of data. So Chris, I know that we've gone long because it's a really big topic. It's a big topic, but tell the audience what website, where are you? Are you on website? And I know you are, but tell me about the website where you were talking about the social media. Because I assume, and I know that on the website, you can tell people how to get more involved. You can talk to people about sponsoring this, and, maybe you can get sponsors to turn all of this into, virtual webinars and training. So, so give your website and give your social media handles.
This is the main website. It's www.accessibility.legal. And we have our on hold graphics up right now with the information for folks about the fact that it's on hold, how to get a copy of the book from last year if they want to, and then and then there's the information about it, along with a link for emailing to get onto the email list to get notifications, a link to the Twitter account, and things like that. So that's
you're on LinkedIn also. So
yes, I'm on LinkedIn as well.
Dr. Chris M. Law.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of resources also on the website. So we have shared resources from the speakers from last year. We'll populate this with the shared resources from the speakers this year. There's a page called Why I'm Speaking, a page called Why Attend, and there's another page called Legal What's Happening Now.
So good resources, even though right now we don't know when the next one is, and the book is available so that those of us that couldn't attend last year have all this great data. So in the bottom line, the goal of this is to help us all move forward to accessibility because we all need it. So that's, why I really wanted to feature it and why we've been engaged as well as a company, because we believe in the work that's being done and a lot of the leaders that are part of it. So, Chris, thank you so much for being on the show today. Before we end, and I know we went a little over, but there's nothing I would have cut out. So, but let me give you the chance to say some final words and then we will say goodbye to the audience.
Sure. We're all in this together, right? In terms of the accessibility field, I've been in the accessibility field now for 25 years or so. And so I know a lot of people that, in terms of figuring out what it is we should do about accessibility, we're all in this together. And this is why having these meetings helps, is why the testing symposium has been a big success as well. Got to get people together on this. And then the wider global situation right now, we've all got to stick together as well. A lot of people are going to be hurting.
Don't panic. Let's be kind to each other. Let's help each other. Listen to leaders that are making sense. If a leader isn't making sense, stop watching them. Stop listening to them. But let's listen to the World Health Organization and the CDCs, and let's wash our hands. Let's be smart. But let's not panic because that's not helping anyone.
So we will get something done by the end of the year for this with the content that we want. The issues that important, we've got to get it out there. Right. So it'll happen somehow. Just really stay in touch, stay tuned.
And knowing that these efforts are going on, I think is very important to our audience as well, because now they know it's here and maybe there's things and ideas they have of ways that we can continue to advance it, even in a time when mass hysteria and, the unfortunateness of the intensity that we're in right now. But Chris, thank you so much for being on the show today. I'm so grateful to the audience, and thank you for everything you're doing. Everybody be calm, everybody be safe, everybody wash your hands, to happy birthday twice. And we got this. So thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Cheers.